Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 21st, 2026 meeting of the Planning Board. I'm the Vice Chair, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over Local Access Channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. Is anybody in the audience recording? Okay, hearing none. We will open the meeting and start with, we're going to start with the review and approval of the meeting minutes from December 17th, 2025. And I'd like to ask the board members if you have any comments, edits, or corrections. Okay, hearing none. I'd like a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Dan?
Aye.
Stephen? Aye. Brian?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
And Stephen?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The minutes are approved. Then we'll move to case number PB 2025-09, which was continued from November 19th, 2025. And the applicant is requesting an additional continuation until May of 2026. And this is because there's a number of changes that are being considered which may preclude this case from having to be heard by the planning board. So I'd like to request, unless there's any questions from the board members, a motion to continue this case to May of 2026.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Dan?
Yeah, I have one comment. It needs to be to a specific date in May.
Okay, the meeting in May, which is, Jackie will,
We need to have the date as part
yeah,
of the
she's
motion.
looking it up.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's the third week in May.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3. The 20th.
May 20th, 2026. So, Dan, do you approve?
Yes,
Okay.
we need a new motion though, because.
Okay. We'll take a new motion to.
I will, to May 20th, 2026.
Okay, do I have a second? Second, Kevin? Okay, do all in favor? Dan?
Aye.
Stephen? Aye. Brian?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
And Stephen?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, the next item is a workshop on the site plan review process and to consider a rubric which has been created by Jackie to help bring a little bit more structure and objectivity into and inclusiveness, quite frankly, making sure that we look at every single element, not just the ones that stand out the most for each case that comes before the planning board. So I think we're going to start with a presentation by Paul and Jackie, followed by a discussion by our group, and then a consideration of next steps of, whether we want to adopt it, whether we want to try it out, and then consider adopting it. And so let's just hear the presentation. Thanks.
So, thank you. So I'll just preface this by saying the reason we're proposing this or, bringing this forward, this is really coming out of all of the changes that we've done to the zoning bylaw over the last few years, and particularly the ones with changes to the site coverage. And the discussions that this board has had and working with the zoning task force and kind of identifying what's working with the changes of the bylaw, what's working, what's not, where are there areas where the board seems to have difficulty working with the bylaw. And part of that is just, does the bylaw need to get adjusted, which we'll be talking about in a few weeks. And then just mechanical, is there ways we can help the board do its work. So this is really where it's coming from, and I know we've talked about this before, but there's bylaws which seem like they should be black and white. It's all there on the page, but actually working with them it gets subjective. And site coverage, and you'll hear these words, it's shaping the project, trying to get to yes, but it gets subjective. And we've been trying our best to get the bylaw to be more objective, but there's still always issues that come up. So really, this is some tools that we hope you'll find useful as a way to kind of structure how we do site coverage. And again, this is for discussion, and we want to hear feedback, and then we'll kind of go from there. So again, this is a workshop, so yeah, questions, comments, discussion. And so Jackie did actually all the hard work of coming up with this idea, which I think is going to be very useful, but again, just preface with, we have site plan review here established in the bylaw in Eastham. Not every town has. Most towns, in fact, don't have residential site plan review. So in Eastham we do, and we have since, I think, 2007. And that's the purpose up there. That's what it says in the bylaw. But I really kind of take this informally to say that the community has decided that they want the planning board involved in what people are doing on their private property, on their residential projects. So they've established that. They want the board to get into this, and see what's going on in the projects they require. And every time we've gone back over the subsequent years to add to this or strengthen it or clarify it, it has been overwhelmingly approved at town meeting. So I just take that as the community as a whole likes the fact that we have this residential site plan review, and they want to give the board more authority and more tools to do this work, so. So, again, this is just a little quick background. The planning board deals with different types of cases. The overwhelming majority of them are residential site plan review, and that is different than a special permit. We have that on the next slide, right? Special- So basically, when the powers that the board has under site plan review residential are to, let's say, the board always basically has to get to yes. You have to approve something. In very narrow parameters, the board could reject a site plan if the board feels not enough information has been provided. Otherwise, in order to get to yes at the end of the day, you can get to yes, but you can, the tool that the board has is conditions. So you can impose reasonable conditions, and I said rejecting the site plan if it poses a public health or public safety or just a clearly totally incompatible with the town in some form. But I would say that it's never happened in my time, and that would be an absolute rarity. So it really comes down to the board for residential site plan review. The property owners have a right to make improvements, but they have to fall within the parameters of the bylaw, and the board's role is really just to make sure that these projects fall within those, meet the guidelines of the bylaw, and to shape the project. And the conditions are a tool. It has rarely been used as a punitive tool, impose a condition to kind of force a project to, but at the end of the day, it's just good to understand, like, that is the tool. If there's an impasse where the applicant's not willing to budge, but the board doesn't see that it's met any of this criteria to say no and reject it, then the conditions are there as a tool. Again, it's really, our experience is really, it's more of a negotiation. You work out the conditions, and it's kind of like amicable. So our conditions are usually just the boilerplate type of things, but in theory, the board could say, we're going to approve this only if you cut the building in half to get it down to a size that's but those are rare.
Yep, Dave?
Should we hold our answers, or can we ask questions as you go along?
Go for it.
On the opening statement of the site plan, it actually says, to afford continued public visual access to ponds, rivers, marshes, and the ocean and the bay. Does that go to a neighbor? If you're gonna build a house and you're gonna block that neighbor's view, is that a legitimate? Because we have been in the past stating that, no.
Well, so that's one of the reasons, that's a good example. That's one of the reasons why we want to talk about if this tool will help us navigate those situations. So to answer your question, yes, that's a legitimate issue that the board can take. Like, what's the impact, what's the visual impact on the neighborhood or the abutter? Now, there's always some give and take. I know you've heard attorneys say, well, no one has a right to a view, and you should have bought the property across the street on the ocean, you know. But that's where it is saying, shaping the project. So it's not really saying, no, you can't build your house there, but maybe we need to look at, like, how can we mitigate the view? What can we do? Where is it sited what kind of structure is it? How tall is it? Is it on the highest part of the property? Does it have to be there? So that's all of the shaping, the twisting, the turning, the discussion points and again, a lot of times, well, I'll wait till we get into the rubric, but.
Thank you.
Special permit.
So again, special permit, there's residential site plan review and then special permit. Special permit, the big difference is when someone's seeking a special permit, it's discretionary. So in that case, the board does have the authority to say no. They could, it has to be based on findings of fact and related to something in the bylaw, but they could just say, no, this project's not gonna work. You can reject it. We only have special permit for commercial, or in the case where a property is already pre-existing to the maximum site coverage limit. So if for their lot, they could only build a 2,000 square foot house, but their house has been there since 1850 and it's already 3,000 square feet, they have some legacy protections where, again, because they have the right to make improvements to the house, but within the bylaw. So there's a carve out in there that basically says for those pre-existing non-conforming, you can propose your improvements, but because you already basically breaking the rule, if you will, it's a special permit, so the board could say no to it, because they could make the judgment that there's no way to make this project work without being detrimental to the neighborhood. So that's a carve out. Again, the board's not compelled to grant a permit. Nobody's entitled to a special permit, so it's completely discretionary again. But that's where the importance of working with the bylaw, understanding the bylaw, and making cogent findings of fact based on the bylaw language is really important. What do we want to say
I
on
think
this
you've
one?
covered some of this.
Yeah, I think we covered this.
So we can get to the rubric. If you're ready for that. All right. So as we take this look back at site plan review, there have been sort of some questions, I would say, over the last couple of months, year even, on how could we strengthen the board's sort of set of tools and how projects are evaluated to provide for some objectivity, for some consistency. And so I have developed a rubric. If you're not familiar with the use of rubrics, fear not. You will be okay. I will help you along the way. If anyone has worked in education for 5 minutes or more, you are familiar with rubrics. So you should have a handful of documents with you. You should have your color-coded 3-page rubric. We'll take a look. That'll be where most of our focus is tonight. For your continued learning and understanding. You have an internal guidance document. This is just for your planning board, for your understanding as we pilot, I would say, this tool. And then for some discussion, whether tonight or at another point, I did include an applicant guide to show you how, if this becomes a tool that the board is going to regularly use, that will also have the potential to shape how applicants are looking at their projects as they prepare to come ahead of you. And then you also got tonight a site plan. You don't have to do anything with that yet, but that's gonna be something, when we go over this a little bit, we're gonna play in the sandbox, and we're gonna practice using the rubric. So that's just a sample site plan that will be up on the screen as well. Okay. Can I just wanna ask, because it'll help me know how to frame some of this. Are folks familiar with a rubric as an evaluation tool?
I'd say no, not me.
I am.
A little bit, not so much. Okay, great. So let's help yourselves, get your rubric out in front of you, please, and we'll talk through it. So the idea with using a rubric, the many ideas, as I said, is to provide some consistent evaluation. So what this is actually just the bylaw. So if you were to go through back into the bylaw, into residential site plan review, 10.3, these are each of the points within the bylaw that you're asked to attend to in your reviews and in your decision-making. And the idea of using a rubric is to put some common language out there for you to determine, not just this is a good project or this is a bad project, but what elements of this are, you see the words that we're going to try using, exemplary. This is really hitting, every mark. This is doing everything that the bylaw asks you to do. That might be the mitigation landscaping plan that uses 100% native species and protects a dune and has groundwater recharge and, right, so those projects that really shine for that criteria. Satisfactory, as it says, right, you're meeting with most of the standards, so you're most of the way there. Maybe there are a few things, maybe we need to shape some conditions, or maybe satisfactory is gonna be good enough on that criteria because other elements are stronger. You may find elements in a project that I would call marginal. So there's some real issues with the proposal in front of you. We're feeling like this is not meeting the expectations that are laid out in the bylaw. This may require some stronger language in conditions, something beyond our standard conditions, or this may be where you're getting into, some continuances and asking for some redesign. And could be simple redesign, could get more complicated. It is our hope that by the time a project is reaching you all, we as staff have had some opportunities to help them get anything that was unacceptable out of that category. Right? There is the opportunity for applicants to meet with us, to meet with the building commissioner, to ask a lot of questions and be designing, with the criteria front and center. Should not be a surprise. But it's not impossible that you would, get a site plan review and it would have some element that feels so egregious that you feel like I can't possibly say yes to this project if this element stands. Go ahead.
I think it's important to remember too that a project doesn't have to be exemplary in every category to get approval. So, and there's no perfect project, so there's always gonna be the give and take of, so again, this is a tool to help kind of identify those areas that maybe are marginal or unacceptable, and then work with the applicant to say, how can we get this up to the next level? It doesn't necessarily that everything has to be exemplary, but to a point where everybody feels this is approvable. And you are all gonna bring your own thoughts to this, so, some members may find something unacceptable and others may say that's,
Right.
satisfactory, but then, so again, this is to help facilitate the discussion, identify where we're having disagreements amongst the board, and kind of level set the discussion at the hearing.
When the staff meets with the applicant, does it meet with the applicant all the time, or is sometimes the developer or the architect, like, what's the relationship between all this, and the applicant as opposed to the developer or the builder, you know?
It depends on the project. I mean, we'll meet with whomever. Usually it is the architect or the engineer. It depends on how big the project is, you know. If they've hired an architect or an engineer, then that's usually who we're meeting with on the applicant's behalf. I mean, they are the applicant on behalf of the owner of the property, but it just depends. But we'll meet with anybody who wants to meet with us, and we encourage that. We would rather have a few preliminary meetings and work through it before, because it saves everybody time and money. You know, we don't want to see people paying their architects for like 5 revisions where we can just have one meeting and we can just say, you know, this is really going to be difficult when you get to the board, you know, this is our take on it. So we try to have that as part of the process.
So as we dive into this, just have the reminder there that this is framework, and as Paula said, we both are seeing this as a tool, not only for your own individual experience as you're evaluating, but also then for discussion here during board meetings. As always, we will continue to provide a staff report. It may start to use language from the rubric to help build consistency, but our read on a project should not dictate the board's decision on a project. We can help provide context. We're helping provide, the facts that are maybe buried in there in the application to help you in your review. But even with this rubric, this is not saying, this is how you must act. That is up
So
to you.
Jackie, to that point, we had talked about this earlier, so you would not be, as part of the staff report, doing your own evaluation, right? So this is just to be used by us.
Correct.
So in other words, you're not gonna sort of seed our thought process by saying, well, you all voted this one feature as marginal.
Right. We're not gonna hand you copies
But
of rubrics
it
as
is
we
hopeful
filled them
that
out.
by the time a project gets to us, that the unacceptable pieces have been vetted.
I'd hope.
But will you still be giving us a staff report?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
one of my questions, Pat, was if we have not had a big volume of cases in the past couple of meetings, but we have had meetings where we've had a number of cases. And this requires some time and attention. We typically don't get the staff report until 2 business days or 3 business days before the meeting. So my question to Jackie and Paul was, could we possibly, shorten that time or start to get application materials sooner? So that we
Because
can
you-
start to do our own homework
Right.
even prior to getting the staff
Exactly,
report.
right, because I would think if you as board members have the application, which is submitted about a month before the meeting at the latest, and you have time for your site visit and you can look at the application, you don't need to wait on a staff report to give it your own read, the application, your own read, and to do your site visit and start to gain your own understanding, right? So arriving at some of your talking points and notes independently, I think is a good thing. And so we want to give you the tool to help with some framework around that. So I don't want this to become daunting. I know there are a lot of note boxes on here. So let's talk about sort of how we're going to use this, and then we're going to practice using it.
And you're not gonna grade us?
As I said to Dan and Michelle the other day, yes, I was a
Red pencil.
I do have them
Mom
at
is a
my office,
teacher.
Kevin. No one is coming in to check your homework as you sit down for your monthly board meeting. This is, intended to be a useful tool for you. I hope that folks can find it user-friendly. It can always go through drafts to become more user-friendly. So I know someone's going to ask me this. What about my handwriting? Doesn't matter. I know this doesn't have to be typed. It would be nice if we can read some of the notes because they may help, especially more complex projects. If you are getting into several additional conditions, if we do need to build additional justification for findings of facts, having your notes to support that as evidence definitely has the potential to be useful. So legible is always nice. But we're not looking for a thesis statement. Right? So, some notes as we go through here, and again, you're going to practice using this, might be, something like commenting on heavy use of native species. That's why I rated it exemplary. Or massing is not broken up. No techniques could be your notes, right? Some of it's going to be shorthand on these first couple of pages, and we'll get to that last page where there's more. But this is also not, I also have a 10-year-old who takes MCAS. You don't have to fill the whole box like on a standardized test, okay?
I guess I just want to add so on the staff level, we're recommending that the board use this. We think this is a good tool. It may go through iterations. Again, that's why we're having this discussion. Ultimately, it's up to the board how you want to, if and how you're going to use this or this rubric or some other tool. So again, it's like, we're going over how to use it. I'm going to practice all this stuff just so that you can get a feel for it and then see, is this the tool you want to use? And then and we can have a discussion about how you want to implement it formally or informally or some other way. So just, yeah, this is all just, everything's up for discussion.
Preliminary. Great. So, sort of just thinking about process, right? This would come into play as you're reviewing application materials. We haven't added criteria onto this rubric. These just are the criteria of the bylaw, spelled out line by line. So it will give you the opportunity to just go through each. There may be projects where, the answer is NA, not applicable, and that'll be okay too. If you have, observations or things that'll become findings of fact potentially, those can go in your notes. And let's talk about sort of the qualitative judgment piece just for a second here. We're not going as far as assigning numerical scores, which was the first draft of the rubric because most rubrics do. Yes, and I'll tell you the reasoning behind that is we felt like it went back to creating sort of that gray area of, that guy down the street got an 83 on his rubric and got approved without an additional condition, and I scored an 85, but you're giving me additional conditions. That's not going to be helpful. So this is not about arriving at a quantitative average for each project, right? So these are still subjective in some measure, but I think what you'll hopefully find by using a rubric is just that feeling of structure and feeling a little more sound to say this is where I have it.
I think it helps protect the board from appeals where an attorney may say, you approved a project that got a 75.
Right.
Where, because it's not, listen, there's no perfect project and it's all push and pull
Sure.
on these different factors. So that's why
Right.
we,
Or weighting. So
Right.
did you also consider weighting, like, that landscape might not
Yes.
carry as much weight as,
Yep, we did,
prevailing
thank you.
character?
Yeah, and in that first draft, we did actually have sort of category weighting to determine which set of criteria were the most important. Maybe those get extra points, like prevailing character. But truthfully, when you look at this as the rubric as a whole, you already have sort of the most boxes under prevailing character, right? Those, much of the bylaw is within that one section. So it sort of naturally already gives some weight to certain areas of the bylaw. Wanted to just talk quickly about roles and then,
Can I just ask another
Oh, yeah.
question? So are these entered into the record in some way? I mean, is it,
so that's part of the discussion also is, I would say, if the board felt like this is a tool we want to formally adopt and have, each board member should be filling out, then I would say, yes, that would become part of the record. So they should be turned in and put into the case file for historic record.
and identified with a specific board member? or does it,
I don't know, I guess that, I could check, that might be a legal question, do you have to identify or not? We can double check on that. But I would say also, this is a good point out though, even without this rubric, any notes you take anyways is all, even if you're scribbling stuff on the back of your, that's
I
technically,
understand
that's all
this,
part of the
that
record.
it just creates more of a trail if an applicant is unhappy with a certain condition and they
Right.
realize that Dave wrote something on his rubric that.
Right, but I just say, even, even now, if someone said, if someone was
No,
appealing
I
it,
know, can we find that out? You know, just, I mean, I get that it would, if we adopt it formally, that this would be entered into the record, but, you know, does that become board member input, planning board input as the board or individual board members, or does it even matter?
It's a great question.
Maybe we can just check with the
yeah.
council.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is yes, whether or not each board member has to if we have to identify each one,
That's my
that's what
question.
we'll check on, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's a good reminder that on discoverable documents,
Yes,
keep your doodling and
exactly.
editorializing to a
Right.
minimum.
Right, right, exactly.
All right.
Jackie, can I just ask one question?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Dan. With the
Okay.
screen shared, I can't see you if you raise your hand, so
Okay.
just jump in anytime.
I have a concern on freedom of information. I would not prefer to have individual board members turn in documents like this, because if there is going to be a lawsuit, they're going to go to this and they're going to find out who decided that it wasn't in conformity of the neighborhood and potentially sue. I don't think it's appropriate for, and I'm just my opinion, that the board members should be identified.
Yeah, again, we'll double check that. I don't know if legally we have to or not, but we'll find that out. But if
That
if
was
someone
my
were
que-
to
That was my
appeal, the-
question, Dan, and I think if we can get away, if we can make this input from the board as a collective, as opposed to from Michelle or Dan or somebody, I would support that.
Well, there's no place on here for our names.
There is on page 3.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll remind you too, right, as a discussion tool, and the notes that you're putting on here, these are likely also going to be the comments that you raise in
Sure.
public meeting on a recording, right, with no anonymity provided. So
I agree.
those things being aligned is probably important, right? Go back to,
yeah,
just as you would not out loud make personal commentary, you would not want to do that on your notes now, because again, those are discoverable in a lawsuit
I mean,
already.
maybe one thing to think about too, adaptation of this idea is that maybe the collective thoughts and feedback of the board is put into like basically one rubric
Yeah.
thing, where you
That's
collect
what I
the
was
majority,
thinking.
instead of everybody having an individual. But that's, again, it's gonna be dependent on how you wanna adopt this, how formally or informally you wanna use this, so.
Yeah, which could assist with the keeping of meeting minutes.
Right.
And just sort of change that process, so.
Is it, I look at the categories, exemplary, satisfactory, marginal, and unacceptable. I don't know if this is just nitpicking too much, but maybe the combination of marginal and unacceptable. I like the way that you described it. You kind of like exemplary was no conditions, satisfactory was none to minimal. And then frankly, after that, to me, there's only one category. And that's, you're gonna have conditions and/or a redesign. And this just leads to this other conversation where if you limit the number of categories, then you might limit the scrutiny with regards to, well, how did you determine that something was marginal versus unacceptable versus satisfactory? Right? To me, it's just kind of like, it's exemplary, it's satisfactory, or it's a combination of marginal and unacceptable. And again, using your words, which, again, I'm new to this, so it's like, oh, okay, there's gonna be conditions and/or a redesign, right? And,
Yep.
you know, boom. So, just a thought.
Thanks. Thanks, appreciate the feedback, because it's gonna help us as we refine. Okay, I think it's gonna really help to practice using it.
That's, yeah.
So I want to get us there. Just a quick note on findings, and we can always come back to this. Right, we'll still, in staff reports, we have always offered the proposed findings. And it has always been true that the board can reject those findings and write new findings. You can amend the findings as proposed, you can add to them, you can delete from them. And so the point of the staff report will continue to be a proposed, a helpful framework to keep things moving toward the decision letter, but that does not mean that what a proposed finding says is what has to stand. If the board chooses to alter that, that is within your purview. So that's true now, and it will remain true in a way that, maybe using the rubric would be helpful for.
And also, just to reconfirm, so from a public meeting law standpoint, it would be important that any discussion we have, from this rubric with either each other or you be done in this meeting,
Yes.
correct? So it's not we hand our homework in ahead of time and or we meet for coffee somewhere and,
No.
and fill out the rubric, like, instead of three of us, we just say, hey, let's just do one. No, okay.
No, you would not want to
Just
run
making
afoul
sure.
of open meeting.
I mean, yeah.
Board
yeah,
members are always able to contact staff
Right,
one-on-one on the side. If you
Right.
just don't understand, I don't know what's going on in the site plan, I don't understand what they're talking about, that's all, you're always do, we just can't, you can't deliberate
right.
outside of a
Just
meeting.
reiterating that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay, we're going to use some images for each criteria. So I'm not going to present you with one, full cover-to-cover application right now. These are, cherry-picked from real homes, some in Eastham, some elsewhere on Cape Cod, real site plans, but a lot of pictures are coming next to then get into the rubric. So what I will ask you, because obviously the pictures are of existing property, is to imagine it as the proposal. This is what is being proposed to you as part of a project. How would you use the rubric to guide, your thinking about it, to guide your discussion? And we'll just go through each and see how we're doing and see how that leads discussion. So on your rubric, you'll see that the first criteria set is landscape. I'll call attention to your internal guide. We haven't talked about that yet, but that document that is the internal guidance document for board members, that does lay all of this back out for you. In there, if you were to look at page 3, you'll see sort of carve-outs of the rubric. There are some questions that you might consider if you're not sure, sort of, how am I supposed to be going about this? There are some questions there that you could use to consider for your own process as you're looking at a project. We're going to start here with landscaping. Right now, in the bylaw, these are the two criteria. We will circle back to talk about perimeter vegetation, which is in section 7 of the bylaw, but is worth some conversation. So let's imagine we're looking at a project. Are you ready?
Yep.
That screen takes a minute to catch up. So if you would, imagine for me that the house with the very green lawn is being proposed. Just assume it's had to come to you for some reason. We're not talking about site coverage right now. We're just looking at landscaping. And for the sake of argument, let's assume that in its quote-unquote existing state, this property looks like its neighbors. It's got pine trees. It's got what we all love to call a Cape Cod lawn, which is the absence of a lawn in favor of pine needles. But we have an applicant, and this is the landscape plan that they are proposing. So with that in mind, take a look at your rubric. And if I know you're not going on full set of information here, and that's okay, right? But let's just talk it out, discussion-wise. What are some things that you notice about the proposed landscape plan. Don't be afraid to shout.
Assuming it
out.
was wooded before,
Yes.
with a lot of clear cutting, I would say it's marginal or unacceptable.
Okay, so you're noticing, again, assuming conditions looked sort of, the neighbors on either side, it appears that this plan proposes significant cutting down of trees.
Yep, significant clearing or grading, limited preservation of natural state.
Okay. Other observations or comments? We don't have the written landscape plan, so we would only have to guess at native species. I think those look like hydrangea
native
down the line,
species.
which are
But there's
not.
nothing, there's nothing
There's-
there.
You tell me.
There's very little, okay? I think we could infer that there's not a lot of grading going on. The neighborhood looks like it's already pretty flat. So if you were looking at natural state preservation, that very first line in your rubric, what's a note that someone might leave for themselves?
That it's not preserved, the natural state isn't preserved.
Great. Not preserved. Marginal. Right. Could this landscape plan be rescued with mitigation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Plantings.
So there's probably some shaping that's gonna go on with providing a more robust plan, meeting the native species requirement that is in the bylaw. All right,
And I think it starts with what gets removed and what doesn't get removed.
sure. Right. Okay, this was your ease in, this one was easy.
Start off slow and then
Start off slowly. It's gonna catch up, there we go. Okay, let's head to another part of town. We have a proposed new home. It's sited in a very wooded area. There was another home there. Again, we're not talking about site coverage or design right now, we're just talking about landscaping. It's winter, so it's hard to see, but what do you notice in this photo that relates to your criteria?
well, the trees don't provide year-round blockage of the view. I mean,
True.
a lot of times we get into that where, by having the proper vegetation, you're not gonna see the house that people may complain about because of size or massing or whatever else.
Right.
Here, you get a straight shot through, those trees are stripped down. They don't even look that healthy, to be quite honest, but,
Well, it is winter. And yet the trees are there,
Are those trees
Firewood.
part of that lot?
yes.
Well, there must have been trees that were of significant size closer to the house.
There may have been, so there may have been trees that are removed.
There could have been legacy trees for
I
that
think they
matter.
preserved a lot of the trees that were there. Looks like, maybe.
So I would say this is a good example of, they didn't clear cut the lot. They kept a lot of the native vegetation, but it doesn't, if the board felt like this house was approvable, but not in keeping with the neighborhood, they did some shaping, but it still needs some some landscape buffering. So preserving that front part, but then I think then what that leads into is preserve what you have, but you need more. So then what do we plant? And it really should be more of what's there, or getting some evergreen things that are appropriate, not putting in Leland cypress or things that are just gonna be more ornamental. And that actually, and this has come up and will come up. Folks don't wanna necessarily plant the things that, no one wants to plant scrub pines. But that's what's there, and that's what's naturalized. And that's what, one of the goals in the bylaw is to keep the naturalized native vegetation. So that's a discussion point with applicants, is like, limit the clear cutting, but you know, and it's a balance, so that's where that, at least 50% of native, and I think the bylaw says native and what's appropriate to the area. And that's gonna depend on the part of town. If you're right on the beach, that's gonna be different than somewhere that's in the middle of the woods, so. Something to think about on that part.
I have a question, and where in the permitting process does this get checked afterwards? You know, because typically
this?
the construction happens and the landscape piece goes in after, but they get a C of O, right? Prior to some of those conditions being met. So when does that happen? After it leaves us? If we put conditions in there that say we need to increase native vegetation as defined by X.
It really has fallen to the building inspector to follow up on that, although that's something we're trying to work on internally, because in my opinion, it's not realistic for one person to be able to keep up with all the conditions. It makes sense when the conditions are related to the design of the building, the structure, but the landscaping and things like that, so we're actually trying to rework our internal capacity so that other staff, you know, basically myself and Jackie can follow up on other things. And again, it's difficult because, and we usually do tie it to either the issuance of the building permit or more often the CO at the end of the project, but that doesn't always work with landscaping because
Right.
they're ready for the CO in the middle of winter, no one's planting anything, and so
Yep.
we wanna, so that's something we're trying to work on,
Okay.
how do we, and this is actually gonna lead into something else to discuss is when we, I'll just preview it, but just when we close out the hearing and like approve a project, it takes time to think through, like, should this be tied to the CO, or is this earlier, can this condition be earlier in the process? Because is it a clearing thing that we wanna, you know, have some time to check? So it's just, but it takes some time to go through that, and where do we put that in the conditions, and maybe we need to
Okay,
continue a
that's good to know.
meeting and think that through, so.
Okay, great. I'll just add to that too, with our permitting software, we have actually been able to add in a step. So essentially, when the building inspector is getting to their final building inspections, there's an alert that comes back to planning staff because we've added the decision letter to that property's file on the software, and the building commissioner is aware that it was a project that had to go through regulatory review. So there's some more communication now that's happening, that's been helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's take a look at that site plan that you have. This computer is taking its time talking to the screen. You wouldn't be able to see it up here, and that's okay. We're sharing it for the record. So this is more familiar to you, right? This is a full landscape plan, professionally provided with project that's, you know, went through review. We don't have to read the whole thing, so I'll give you some highlights, because you haven't had time with it. But you can see, even just at a quick glance, there is this lengthy restoration notes on the right-hand side of the sheet that explains current conditions, what plantings are being used to restore or mitigate or protect, depending on the language, what areas are naturalized and being left undisturbed, which trees are going in and where and how many, what other types of species are going in. I'll skip you ahead to the, I didn't take a percentage on these today, but the vast majority are native plantings. We have all the information in front of us. This is
Exemplary.
a piece that slopes toward the water. So there's some grading. You can see that there's a long driveway down the panhandle. And so this is the type of landscape plan that, at least with our larger and more complex projects that are coming forward, I think we're seeing more often these professionally prepared plans. Right? Applicants do not have to submit a plan in this detail. Right? They may have a landscape plan that is narrative, that lists, here's what we plan to do, and depending on the project, that may feel sufficient, or the board may feel that they need to see it laid out more clearly.
The board can always ask for more information.
Right.
Nice.
I think one thing to point out on this is this site is located next to natural resource area. And so most likely this had to go to conservation, which is obviously taking a more detailed view on it. In the past, usually where a project's going to conservation and planning, we've kind of ridden the coattails of the conservation as far as the landscaping, because they've already gone through that process and they have an order of conditions, and we kind of like have assumed that what they're doing is appropriate and it's not, the right vegetation, they're mitigating, they're improving things. And so for the areas that are within the conservation jurisdiction, typically, I guess from a staff level, I've never really kind of touched that. I've just provided the board, this has already been vetted, and we kind of focus on if there's areas outside of the conservation jurisdiction, because that way we can make sure like there's consistency there, and it's, they're not saying, well, we did everything we had to for conservation, but on the upland side, we want to put, what we want, and it's going to be completely like black and white. It doesn't really, most people want a cohesive landscaping plan, but that's kind of area where the boards are kind of have shared jurisdiction.
Sure.
And we've kind of always deferred to conservation, and staff usually recommends that you kind of go to conservation first.
Well, we just had a project recently, Paul, where maybe it had to go back to conservation, but it came to us, and they needed another review. And so the order of operations, I think, is important here. Is there a way to manage that so that it doesn't come to us in situations like this before it goes to them? In other words, there was a hearing, it doesn't matter what project it was.
They were running concurrently with continuances in both.
They were running
boards.
concurrently with
Yeah.
continuances with us.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to prevent someone from filing with the boards,
So if we continue to the meeting in February and CONSCOM isn't until March, we don't have control of that.
Well, you do in the fact that you could determine, like, there's too much going on with conservation that's not decided yet, and it's gonna impact us. So the board could say, we're gonna continue this.
Got it.
But we can't say, no, you can't apply to conservation until you go to planning. So that's the part where it's really the applicant, they may just, they're gonna decide which one. When we meet with them, we try to guide them and say, it doesn't make sense to go to planning board yet. Get through conservation and
Right.
health first.
Okay.
Right.
But technically, we can't prevent someone from.
No, I understand that, but as long as you're explaining the
Yeah.
Right.
order.
I think to know that there is conversation between departments as well, and so I think we're thinking of the same one, and right, my question is conservation gonna have them move this house substantially? Which would have pushed it into setbacks.
Right.
Right, and
Right.
being able to just speak with a colleague and say, no, I don't think it's gonna go that far, it's maybe 2 feet, maybe it's 4 feet, but it's not 20 feet. Okay, right, and then we can sort of share that information to say could be some movement.
Great.
So, we do have those conversations. Okay, hang on to that site plan for later, we're not gonna dissect the whole thing tonight. Let's get into the real meat. Again, I know that this can be hard to evaluate when we're forcing ourselves into a project that does not exist. So the vast majority of just your areas of the bylaw that you're considering fall, within the prevailing character, height and scale, massing, right? We're talking about all of those things. So those are both on page 1 and page 2 of your rubric. And you do, again, as you go through this on your own, if you want to use that internal guide when we get to practicing this on a full project, there will be some questions and some help to work you through there. But let's take a look. So I'm going to show you a picture of a proposed new build. Proposed new build. Let's assume vacant lot, proposed new build, and then I will show you some neighborhood context. And so we'll talk there. We're going to assume that, site coverage has its own data. So we don't need to say, is this inside coverage? It's not. We're only talking about sort of these elements first. So here is your proposal for a new build, not a huge home. Here's your proposal for a new build. Looks like there's some water back there, so maybe we're on the way to the bay or the ocean. And some neighborhood context for you. So these are, much like we've seen a couple of attorneys do recently, we've got snapshots of other homes in the area. So this is where we need to spend a little bit of time as you take a look at that rubric, how you might apply sort of each element of the criteria as you go through. Some of it we might not be able to tackle here because we don't have a site plan to think about massing, or rather about siting. But you could look at the character, the height and scale, the massing. We'll assume they're within conforming setbacks. Building materials, and I can click back to the larger photo when you're ready. Lighting, and architectural techniques, that's where we are right now. So if you want, you have your rubric in front of you. Maybe if you're up for it, go through and sort of circle at each line. Where would you evaluate? Anything that jumps out at you? Would it help to put the large proposal photo back up?
I like this one
Okay.
personally, but
Certainly in terms of style, the proposed looks like it would fit in Ashland very well, but not,
So where does that appear on your rubric?
under prevailing character.
prevailing character is the whole category. Oh, and then
Well-
the
Well, it does have a sort of a
Yeah.
range.
Criterion is broken
Yeah.
down further, though.
So this is where we get into those notes, because it's one thing to say that it doesn't fit, but what we need to be able to explain is why.
I think in terms of some of the other criteria, height and scale, I don't think there's anything offensive there. I mean, you've got two-story buildings and larger buildings and that type of thing is the examples around there, so that, I guess, is a positive in that sense. It does have, in terms of just the massing of it, it doesn't have any issues with that either. There's a little bit of, whether it's the color or, on the left-hand side, you get the second floor, that's the white section. Below that, you've got a different color, but it looks like the second floor extends slightly beyond the first
Yep, it's a
floor.
bit of an
Gives some
overhang.
depth to it, So I guess that's a positive. I'm not saying I would say no to the project, but what first strikes me is that the architectural style is rather unique to this area. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but you do notice it.
So,
And I think that's prevailing character, so to me, I would give marginal to prevailing character. It doesn't look like a Cape house, it looks like a subdivision house. Height and scale is fine, massing is fine, setbacks and sighting is satisfactory. And that's probably the issue, the majority of, I'm sure the lighting is down shielded, but the overall neighborhood character. So my question then is, I'm not saying what my opinion is the majority opinion here. This is where we run into the issue, and I'm trying to figure out how this rubric helps us. I think it does, but, because it takes each component into consideration, so that I guess the net of it, short of having numerical score associated with it, is there's one feature that might be off and the other four might be fine.
So,
So I don't know where I'm talking myself into, but does that net out to?
I'm gonna let you talk it out a little bit.
Does that net out to, well, it's like Kevin said, it's not all that bad.
Well, each board member, you're gonna all have you're gonna come to
I
it.
mean, that's my view.
You're gonna come to it with your own interpretations, you know, and I think, again, the rubric's there to help gather your thoughts and kind of organize, and then facilitate the discussion. And I think part of like the discussion of how the course of the meeting goes through is just like, if you have something that's helped you organize your thoughts, and then it's easier to bring that up. If you're clearly hearing that like the majority of the board thinks this is perfect, but perfectly suitable, but you're on the other end of the spectrum on it, at least you've got something, you're not just kind of having to organize your thoughts off the cuff, you have something
Yeah.
that.
Right.
But,
I agree.
but this also goes into, at the beginning of this, that first slide, the purpose of the site plan, and I said, this gets subjective.
Yeah.
But the bylaw is there because the community has said, we want the board to get into, like, this might be someone's dream house, and they think this is a lovely design, this is what they want. And it gets difficult to say, you know, no, you can't have your dream house, this is the house I always wanted to build, but that's what the bylaw is there. We've decided as a community that we want someone looking at these projects and how they fit into the neighborhood, and then you get into, okay, then what do we do? It's shaping the project. Is there a way we can meet in the middle somewhere to say, okay, the roof lines don't fit in with the neighborhood, or the, you know, whatever it is, or the materials, but that's shaping the project. Can we work together with the applicant to get to something where each, you know, we can walk away from each side saying, we got a project that we think fits. And it's like, those are the key terms, shaping the project.
Where does form-based code fit into this?
It doesn't
Nowhere yet.
right now. So we don't have form-based code in
Residential.
residential.
We bring it into residential?
So I want to stay here for a moment, and let's draw our attention to massing. I think massing is a really good one to talk about, because this is not a particularly large home. It's likely smaller than that home on the bottom right, square footage wise, maybe even smaller than the bottom left, or the top left, excuse me. But massing is, you know, sort of a multi-layered approach. So if you looked at exemplary under massing, exemplary is balanced proportions to lot and neighborhood, uses dormers, setbacks, overhangs, porches, facade variation, and interconnected elements. A project does not have to rate exemplary in order to be approved. So if you look over one, so you know what the absolute top description is. You look to satisfactory, some mass reduction techniques are applied. Kevin mentioned the overhang of the second floor, which sort of visually moves back. There's facade variation even on the first floor between those two gray sections. Okay. There is not a porch. There are no dormers. So some people might look at this and say, well, it has it's meeting some but not all, so I would call it satisfactory. And again, I'm sorry, this is going to get repetitive. The notes are where you jot yourself some language around why. Why is this satisfactory or marginal? So that when you come in here, you're able to speak on that for a specific reason, right? I'm not seeing this as compatible because it has flat roofs in a neighborhood where every other roof is pitched. Right, so it's giving you, you know, the ability to sort of pause in each criteria. And I know this is where, as Michelle said, this takes a little bit of work. This is more than a quick, yeah, looks good. Or, my gut instinct is that I don't particularly like this house, so I'm gonna come to the meeting and say, I don't like this house. Right, so to be able to go through the criteria and have sort of that thought process prepared.
Kind of a big picture thing to keep in mind too, though, is it's not the board's job to design the project for the applicant, so ideally the applicant should be coming in with something that is gonna rate highly on the bylaw and meet these criteria. Again, not gonna be perfect, but I just don't want to, I don't want the board to feel overwhelmed, like we're taking all these notes and we gotta come up, you know, these are just to help you organize your thoughts. We don't have to, we're not redesigning this house, but this is just identifying, like, the thing that's not working here, it's clearly not in the same style, or the massing, or it's way too big. It's just, that's, at the end of the day, the applicant has to come in here and convince the board that this project works, and here's why. And you may not agree with it, but that's where you use the rubric.
To me, there's also something about the building materials, like, I don't know why they went with that white. I don't know why they went with those two contrasting colors,
Sure.
but that's, is that the building material?
Or is that the color, right? So the difference between,
Yeah, it
is
might
this
be that-
vinyl siding? Is this painted clapboard? Is this metal?
You've also got in the middle, in the first floor, but below the deck,
Right,
Third siding
that's
option.
like
something else.
it's like a stained, not painted dark, it's like natural look to
Wood.
it kind of thing, so they're kind of playing with the colors and things of it.
I'm gonna ask you to envision the same neighborhood, but with a different house. So how about this proposal? What do you notice as you would apply it in the language of the bylaw? As you were discussing this together?
Can you put that with those other houses around it that we already looked at, or is that, I mean, they're in my head, but I wasn't sure if it was,
No, but I can click back and forth.
that's all right.
Dormers.
Roof lines are
Porch.
consistent.
Pitched roof,
Sorry, what was that?
Roof lines are consistent.
Roof lines, yep, similar roof lines to the rest of the neighborhood.
Doesn't look like the lighting is downshielded.
Great.
the,
Good eyes, Steve. See some onion lights in there, but they're under the porch.
again, there's a sense of depth because the middle section protrudes farther than the back sections, middle third of it.
Well, and it seems proportionate, where the other one didn't.
Sure. In a neighborhood where other houses, I'll go back. Right, so this is a modern design with this second-story offset in a neighborhood where other, even second-story houses are a little more consistent, a little more proportional. So you change that to,
Do the solar panels come into play at all?
no,
Okay, I'm just curious.
good question.
It's the only one that had those.
Good, because I had my new ones just signed off on today, so timing couldn't have been better, huh?
How about this one?
All right, that's the same neighborhood?
It looks like a commercial building.
Yeah.
More than it does residential. Yeah.
This is a residential home in Eastham. This residential home is redundant. Residential restaurant.
Why?
So using your rubric as your sort of discussion frame,
Well, I would argue, in terms of prevailing character, it doesn't seem to fit the neighborhood. I mean, it's got a pitched roof, so there's a plus there. But, again, to me, it just looks more commercial than anything else.
can I push you a little? What,
Sure.
what looks commercial? What elements?
Well, just the windows are,
Yeah, the window structure is part of it. Like the far left, there must be slider windows, I don't know, doors, but it almost looks like it's a display area. I expect that to
Yeah.
be a bath
Bars.
and kitchen store,
Sure.
showroom type of thing. The far right has the one window. I suppose if you pull back a little bit, there might be another window on the other side of it. But you got the big spotlight at the top. That just looks like the dead space, a lot of dead space on that section.
Thank you. Michelle, I heard you mention building materials.
Yeah. I can't feel what they are, see what they are, but building materials, no dormers.
What about massing?
It just landed.
It's-
There's no depth here at all,
Yeah.
other than the roof on the sort of middle section there, it protrudes a little bit, but otherwise just a straight box. It's just,
And I don't know, but this thing about the short dimension is supposed to be, is oriented towards the street. I think maybe the whole front might be facing the street, but I'm not sure.
yeah, it's hard to tell.
You are correct. Okay. Questions on any of that, or that you would like to go back to? You cannot. Unfortunately, that is not in the bylaw. So it is not a justification in your finding of facts.
That, just going back to that short dimension thing, that's one of those things where it depends on what the project is and where it's sited, like, that might be a way to say, you know, this could work if you twisted it so the short dimension was towards the street, given what the surrounding areas, but obviously if you're on a typical subdivision street where every you know, that, you know, then it blends in, so that's like maybe something that is not a factor, you know, that's a tool that's there if it's an appropriate way to help shape that project, to say this could work, let's just flip it around, you know, if it works within the context, so. That's why there's always gonna be pushing and pulling different factors in these criterias.
And what we're not looking at here, but I think it's just to sort of pop it into your brain, what if this was on a 2-acre lot surrounded by other large lots that may have more traditional homes on them, but you can't see this from the street? You know, would,
It's
you know,
still an ugly
does
house.
citing mitigate maybe some of the lack of prevailing character? Right, so it's important to keep in mind that though we're looking at these in isolation right now, as we learn our way through the rubric, you're never actually looking at any one of these lines in isolation. Right, so what changes when this is on a large lot in the woods, if anything? Or on a lot that then has an extensive landscaping plan that includes, you know, the reforesting of significant evergreens, you know, on a lot that had been clear cut in the past, right? So are there mitigation strategies that fall within other criteria? When someone does sit there and says, I get that this isn't the style that this board loves, but this is my dream house. This is what I have been laying awake designing in my brain for the last decade and saving for.
That's why it does, gonna keep saying this, it does get subjective, but it's just really based on the setting. Because when you go back to the purpose, that first slide, I had the
Yeah.
purpose statement. Site coverage, site plan approval, it's really geared toward protecting
Right, and Dave
the
brought that up.
neighborhood and the impact and the community character. So again, if you're on this 5-acre piece of land out in the seashore somewhere, and there is no streetscape, you're down a driveway, I mean, that's a huge mitigating factor, just that alone, and maybe it's not, no matter what the design is.
But I
It's
think
not-
that's the issue, though. I mean, if a lot of other towns don't do site plan review, and we're doing it because we care about the prevailing character, and I know we're not waiting or proposing to weight the criteria. But I think that what we've seen happen here is we approve a project like that, and that becomes the precedent for the next project that says, wait a minute, this building material has been used before, this, you know, kind of orientation has been used before, and this is a project that's different from every other house in the neighborhood. So
And
this,
that's where the context becomes so important in your rationale, in your findings of fact.
right.
Right,
I
that,
feel
that
pretty
may be
strongly
findings
about-
that while this uses non-traditional building materials and has a flat roof line that is not typical to the neighborhood,